We're trying to coordinate to help all of you.
Están coordinando.
Surprise flight from the border.
We find it morally repulsive.
Migrants on Martha's Vineyard, the first in Florida's plan to intervene.
At the end of the day, this is a massive policy failure by the president.
They're willing to use humans, children, women, families, as political pawns.
They're no longer illegals, they're undocumented. They're refugees.
They were told there was a surprise present for them and that there would be jobs and housing awaiting for them when they arrived.
The governor promises more to come.
I think what we're continuing to do is use every tool at our disposal to insulate the state of Florida.
I knew that we needed to take a look closer into what had occurred.
Fallout and forced change.
I'm wondering why the board should not take further action in light of her decision to consciously disregard rules.
New board, new mandates, race for state rep, and the balance of power. The big news of the week and the newsmakers all live this week in South Florida. Good morning. I'm Glenna Milberg. Michael is off today. We begin with education and the politics of education in the spotlight statewide. South Florida school districts are grappling with seismic changes, and probably none more so than Broward's, where a newly constituted school board is managing the fallout of a scathing grand jury report, and the state board is questioning the future of the superintendent. New board member and even newer unanimously elected chair Torey Alston is here. And Torey, we thank you for being here. If everyone only knew how you got here and what you've given up, arranged family time, rearranged church for us, we are very grateful to have you here with us.
Yes, ma'am. Glad to be with you, Glenna. Good morning.
Good morning. So let's start with the news of the week, and then we'll kind of backtrack a little bit. But the news of the week, a portion of it anyway, is the board unanimously decided to stop paying the legal fees, legal bills, for the 4 suspended school board members. The governor suspended them on the recommendation of the grand jury. And that's a pretty big financial hit to them, a big financial decision. Take us through that decision.
Sure. Well, again, good morning, Glenna, and good morning to the listening audience. So glad to join you. But no, you're absolutely correct. As board chair, one of the first items that I brought to the board was to ensure that we stop paying legal payments for the suspended board members. I think it was wrong. It was a slap in the face to taxpayers. I think it screams wasteful spending. So I'm proud that I brought the item to the board, and it passed, as you said, unanimously 9-0 by the board.
And so take us through a little bit, because the reason that there are court fees, these 4, at least a few of the 4, try to keep their names out of the public in that grand jury report, they're taking it to court for their own privacy purposes, it seems like. And so wouldn't those fees be under color of what their public job was? I mean, they were operating as board members. So how would those legal fees not be appropriate in that respect?
Yes, no, fair question. So I believe that suppressing the report absolutely goes against transparency. Clearly, if the voters, I think, had a clearer picture of what was going on, who knows, things might have been a little different. But I'm proud that my colleagues on this new reform board, we stood strong together, 9-0, and said anything from the date that the governor suspended those 4 board members forward, there will be no additional fees going towards supporting those former board members.
A lot of changes coming down the pike at Broward Schools, it sounds like. Let's back up a little bit. New board member, new board chair, just after being a new Broward commissioner. The governor appointed you to the Broward Commission just last year. How did you get here? Did you apply for this job? Did the governor just kind of take you as a chief of staff of FDOT, Florida Department of Transportation? Is this something that you wanted to do?
Well, no, fair question, Glenna. So I have always been around public service, watching my mom and dad, my dad, a deceased BSO deputy, my mom, a retired social worker from Broward Health. As I've said before, if it had not been for the Lord on my side, I don't know where I would be. And as I've said in many settings, God is good. On this Sunday morning, I'll say that once again to our viewing audience. But no, I am absolutely thrilled that the governor selected me to serve on the Broward School Board. And as you mentioned before, serving on the county commission, working collegially on that board with my colleagues at the time to get some great things done. I've been at the Florida Department of Transportation, as you mentioned, serving as chief of staff for a $10 billion enterprise. So I know how to get things done. I know how to work in large organizations. I've done it at the state level. I've done it at the local level. I've done it in my own business and as a senior executive working for other firms. So look, this is a great opportunity. And I'll just tell you, I was proud to stand with my former principal and former deputy superintendent, Dr. Erlene Smiley, who stood with me and my family to swear me in. So I'm looking forward to great things to come. This new reform board, we've already done some great things in just a short time to refocus the vision of the board, to ensure that we get to an A school district, just as Miami-Dade, just as Palm Beach School District. We can do it in Broward and ensure that 100% proficiency of all students across all of our various subjects. So that's my goal. Keeping the board focused on the students, focused on day-to-day activities, of course, belongs to the superintendent and not the board.
Yeah, you know, a lot of the public focus, unfortunately, recently has been that grand jury report. I just learned that you were actually a student board member 20-something years ago. Since that, Torey Alston, there have been 3 grand jury reports focused on Broward schools. Let's just talk about this recent one. Really all found kind of in similar veins, details different, but similar veins of massive bureaucracy, lack of accountability, some recommendations, failures. It started out focusing on security failures at Marjory Stoneman Douglas, but then was broadened out into failures of the Capitol campaign, building, repairing schools. And so the lack of oversight, the recommendations through not only the 4 school board members, but now 3 department heads have resigned this week or took early retirement. And the state board now focused on your superintendent, wondering whether the state could suspend her, which they cannot, but you can and your colleagues can. Take us through, now that you've seen some of the consequences, have participated in some of the consequences. Is Vicki Cartwright's job at stake?
No, that's a fair question. And look, I appreciate all the feedback that I've received from our parents who reach out to me daily, employees of the school system, both instructional and non-instructional, parent groups, homeowner association presidents, my fellow school board members from other districts down south. Many of my friends, whether it's board members Navarro, the vice chair, the chair, Dorothy Mendross-Mendengal up north, board members Andrews and Robinson. Again, many board members that I know very, very well just in this region and even more all across the state. I appreciate hearing from all of our education leaders. But here is what you and the public should know. This new board looks like Broward County. This new board is competent. This new board brings a diversity of experiences, teachers in the classroom, administrators, construction background, attorneys. So collectively bringing solid experiences. And overall, I can tell you that we are independent minded and we'll do the right thing. In terms of performance, the public should know that we are going through the process right now as a board to do the performance evaluation for the superintendent. So very soon, everyone will know what the board collectively believes on the superintendent and her performance thus far.
You had mentioned your goal is to be an A-rated school, a lot of focus on academics. I know we had been talking about what people may not see and the, I suppose, the post-pandemic issues in education and benchmarking. And those I think are maybe much more serious than people realize.
Absolutely, and Glenna, thank you for that lead in. I will tell you that has been a part of my screams for the last 3 weeks. If we all just focus on the kids, if we focus on student achievement, everything else will work itself out. And I think collectively as a board, I think we're there, and I'll just say 9-0, focused on student achievement, focused on student safety, all the big key issues that any school board should focus on. That's governance, that's policy, and that's making sure from a budget standpoint, we ensure the fiduciary role of the board. But you're absolutely right. We are in a learning crisis in Broward County. And, you know, for me, when 52% of third graders are proficient in English, only 52%, that's a problem. When only 48% of ninth graders are proficient in algebra, for me, and I think for anyone, that's a problem. When only 47% of eighth graders are proficient in science, we have a learning emergency. So those are the types of gains and gaps and data points that I want to focus on the board. And we've started the conversation. This board has been very prudent, and I think we're going to have more conversation coming in the days and weeks to come.
Board Chair Torey Alston, you know that is not a controversial topic, and we are right there with you in making all South Florida districts an A district as much as we can participate in that. So thank you so much for your time. If only people knew how much I've hounded you this week to get here. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Well, Glenna, thank you, and to the viewing public, thank you for the opportunity. And I want to salute all of our employees of the Broward School System. Thank you for all that you do. And thank you again, Glenna, for the opportunity.
All right, take care. Thanks. And next, South Florida grapples with issues over immigration every day. And now the governor has exported them in a most controversial way. We are taking you to Martha's Vineyard next. Developing this weekend, increasing scrutiny on the Florida plan to gather and pay for migrants crossing the southern border to relocate in other cities, so-called sanctuary cities. We first learned of the group of Venezuelan migrant families flown to Martha's Vineyard this week when Governor Ron DeSantis confirmed his involvement and gave a broadcast exclusive to a conservative cable newscast. In the face of growing outcry from those who see this as using desperate migrants as political props, Governor DeSantis outlined the plan and the funding for it as a way to protect Florida from the costs of what he calls an illegal immigration crisis. And now there are conflicting accounts of how those people came to be on Florida's 2 chartered flights, what they were told, what they expected, and now what happens. So, live with us this morning, Massachusetts State Rep Dylan Fernandes, whose district includes Martha's Vineyard, and who has spent much of the last few days on the logistics of sheltering those newly arrived. Representative Fernandes, it is so good to have you with us.
Good to be with you, Glenna.
So I know you've been on the air a lot. Usually we don't have state reps from other states on this program. We are grateful that you have joined us because you have had a firsthand conversation and involvement with those migrants, which our governor seems to think were headed for Florida in the first place. So right now, I just want you to set the scene. They've been relocated to sheltering on the base there, and how are they?
Right now, they're in good shape. So for folks who've been following this, they arrived on Wednesday evening with no notice whatsoever. But as soon as our community on Martha's Vineyard found out that they were here, we jumped into action, giving them not just the food and shelter that they needed, but also the health care, dental care, a room for the children to be able to play in. Actually, Spanish-speaking middle school students from our local middle school came over and made bracelets with the young kids who were part of this. To make them feel more at home. And then, they were stood up at a facility immediately at this church called St. Andrew's Parish in Edgartown. But ultimately, this was only a short-term solution. There was only 2 bathrooms and 1 shower at this facility, which acts as the winter homeless shelter here on island. And so a long-term solution was needed, a more humane solution was needed. And so people, the migrants, and these are people, children, families, they were given the option to move to a much larger, more equipped facility on Cape Cod. And they all chose to do that. And now this is a place that has private rooms for the families. It has wraparound services, caseworkers for housing. And of course, their immigration attorneys not only traveled with them to the site, but more were on site waiting for them to help work through their various immigration claims.
Well, all that is very good news for them. I want to just kind of now blow this up a little bit into a bigger picture because you said something that I think is very key. You got no notice. And so what Governor DeSantis and other Republican, especially border state governors have been doing, and you know it's been in the news. They've been busing some of the migrants to D.C. in front of the Naval Observatory where the vice president lives. Also, no notice. So the actual movement of migrants aside, it's the notice and the purpose and the play that these governors are making to shine a light on what they call a border crisis. So my question to you is, if you had gotten notice as a sanctuary state, a sanctuary city, had you gotten notice of this, would this have been okay for you?
Well, look, these governors are, they're trying to create and manufacture a humanitarian crisis, and they wanted to create chaos. But the people who landed here weren't met with chaos, they were met with compassion. And that's what this island and this state shows human beings. We treat every human like a person, and that's what these people are: women, children, families. We treat them with the humanity and dignity that every human being deserves. And look, you guys have a governor in Florida, and my heart goes out to the people of Florida, because you have a governor who's spending his time not on the many issues facing Florida residents, but spending his time hatching a secretive plot using your taxpayer dollars to hatch a plot to use vulnerable people as political pawns.
So
because I think that's just absolutely depraved thing to do.
Well, because the governor is not here to defend, and I'm certainly not in a position to defend any administration, but I have covered the governor and his office enough to know that a couple of things. First of all, the pot of money for this was actually part of the budget, voted on in a bipartisan way. The governor is involved in other things, of course, besides this. But the purpose for this, and not how it's done, and no judgment here, but I will say that the purpose for this is to shine a light on what he believes and what others believe is an untenable immigration crisis, and a lot of people in a few states. So I guess my question to you is, Florida is not a sanctuary state, and whatever your politics are and the judgments are what they are. But there are states such as yours that are deemed sanctuary states. So do these governors have a point in that the immigration load should be borne by more than just a few states? And would that be okay in Massachusetts if the infrastructure were better laid, if there were more notice, and if there were preparations? Does that make sense?
Sure. And look, I agree that we have a broken immigration system in this country, and I think we need a bipartisan solution to fix that. Immigration is a federal issue. I work on the state level, but I am in total agreement that we need a fix there. And look, these communities that I represent, Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, are already incredibly welcoming. Over a third of our school population here on Martha's Vineyard is non-white. On Nantucket, it's actually majority minority. And in the past decade, we've seen a huge influx of immigrants that has made that population in our school district majority non-white. And your governor of all people should know that, because he was here just a month ago raising money on Nantucket at a $50,000 a plate dinner. So, he's familiar with the islands we have here.
Fair enough. I want to delve into a little bit about the conflicting reports that we're getting. Governor DeSantis had a Q&A in one of his press conferences, and he talked about how they were profiled as people who were headed for Florida, intercepted, given a choice, a voluntary flight where there would be people to take care of them, given information about where they were going. Now we're hearing from some of the reports of the immigration attorneys that are dealing with their new clients that might not have been the case, that they were recruited, that they didn't know where they were going, that there were no jobs and housing. What do you know about that firsthand?
Yeah, look, we know for a fact that these people were lied to, and we know that through conversations with them. As you mentioned, they were promised jobs and housing and to be greeted here as soon as they landed. Of course, we were given, as I mentioned earlier, no notice whatsoever. None of them were told they were going to Martha's Vineyard. Some were told they were going to Boston. Others thought they were going to New York or going to their immigration appointments. And so it is very clear that these people were lied to. And so there's real implications here. Not only is this kind of, criminally, morally criminal, but there's some legal implications here around fraud and kidnapping and human trafficking, deprivation of liberty that I know these attorneys are looking into. And I've talked with our U.S. attorney here and calling on the Department of Justice to look into this as well.
The people who are now dealing with them most closely, I imagine, are their immigration attorneys. Where does it go from here? Where will their asylum requests play out geographically and also practically?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, this is on a case-by-case basis, as you can imagine, Glenna. I'll be at the facility tomorrow. I haven't been by since they've landed here on Cape Cod. Wanted to give them some time to rest and acclimate themselves. But look, we have case managers working with people who met them there on the base to work out not only long-term housing, but also work out educational opportunities for the children. It's going to come down to each individual's immigration status and also what each individual or their families, and again, these are families with children, what they want, right? Like they are all here voluntarily. They can leave whenever they want. And so we ground ourselves in Massachusetts on treating people with humanity and dignity. And so it's going to depend on what they want. I will note that, these are asylum seekers. They are here legally. And so we have immigration attorneys working through those claims. There's been an outpouring of support from Martha's Vineyard, from Cape Cod, Nantucket, of people who want to give the people here jobs and shelter and the like. And so once we figure out their claims with their attorneys, then we're going to be working with caseworkers to have a more sustainable solution.
Massachusetts State Rep Dylan Fernandes, so grateful for your time this morning, and thank you, and stay warm.
Pleasure to be with you. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
All right, up next, the backlash to that relocation plan is significant, as you know, in South Florida, where so many see themselves in those families. Outrage in much of South Florida's sizable Venezuelan community, and maybe a bit of confusion over why the same governor who condemns socialist dictatorships is now calling the Venezuelan migrants he flew to Martha's Vineyard illegal aliens. Maria Corina is with the American Business Immigration Coalition and was part of a vocal protest against those surprise flights and, according to the governor, other flights to come. Maria, great to have you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Glenna, for having me. It's a pleasure.
So you've, of course, so you've been here a while. This is not your first rodeo. You were out there protesting this week against the flights, and I'm sure you were also here when the candidates were around in 2018 and 2020. And the same candidates who really take every opportunity to condemn the Maduro regime, to condemn socialists as evil, are now exporting Venezuelans who are crossing the border looking for asylum to a different state. And I wonder how you hear those two things. Can they live together?
No, and actually I wanted to thank State Representative Dylan Fernandes for his leadership and demonstration of true American and Christian values, first of all. Immigrants strengthen our economy, and Governor DeSantis is doing nothing to fix our broken immigration system. He's adding to the chaos, like Representative Fernandes said, and not providing solutions.
So let me just let me just take you point by point then, just in the interest of television, which can be pretty speedy sometimes. So it is not, immigration is not a state issue. Immigration is a federal issue. And and to your point, there are even those working on it in a bipartisan way in South Florida, Republican and Democrat, trying to do immigration reform will tell you, you're right, it's pretty much stalled. So what are the border states then left to do about that?
Well, not what Governor DeSantis is doing, treating immigrants in a way that is inhumane. I mean, immigrants and Venezuelan immigrants are asylum seekers. They're here with status. They come here to work and to contribute to our communities. Florida is currently facing an inflation crisis that is worsened by an unprecedented labor shortages. And our businesses, particularly key industries at the core of the economy, such as agriculture and hospitality, are in dire need of new workers.
Okay, so you come with this from a business and an economy point of view. That is your organization, a bipartisan organization. And we know intuitively that an immigrant workforce is critical to South Florida's economy. So that's
integral. Yes, integral. Exactly. So and Venezuelans, the Venezuelan community, I mean, there are 400,000 immigrant entrepreneurs in Florida. Last year alone, they added $8 billion to our state economy. Businesses in Doral, Weston, South Miami, Coral Gables, downtown, and elsewhere in Miami and the rest of the state, where Venezuelan immigrants work hard.
And so now... Okay, so now, and that said, so we watch now in real time a real humanitarian issue playing out with this particular group of Venezuelan migrants, as well as thousands of others who are being taken from the border and bused to other states this weekend. So take us through how someone can get here as a legal migrant employable to contribute to South Florida's workforce, because right now what the governor and his supporters see are people illegally crossing a border. Explain that.
These people, first of all, are asylum seekers. They have a legal right to do that when they cross the border after suffering many hardships. They surrender to authorities and seek asylum, and they have status as a result, and they are waiting a court hearing, and they're able and willing to work. And the governor interjecting himself, tricking them, trafficking them, and in a way that can potentially hurt their immigration case so that they can be deported is frankly disgusting.
Explain how this would hurt their immigration case.
Because as I understand it, and I'm not one of an immigration attorney, that these immigrants would like to, they were told they had jobs waiting for them. And as State Representative Fernandes was pointing out, when they surrender to authorities and they're paroled, or they get, their instructions they have to report to the immigration courts to plead their case for asylum. And if they're unable to do that because they're in another part of the country where they went under false pretenses or, with misrepresentations of what they would be expecting. I mean, they're being preyed upon, and this is frankly unacceptable.
So would you be in...
And, Venezuelans here in Florida, I'm just saying, Venezuelans here in Florida, we own, manage, work, banks, churro factories, franchises, restaurants, arepa stores, pequeños, chocolate stores, car dealerships, real estate developers.
Understood. Of course.
Hotels.
Part of the
we
fabric.
We are doctors. We are lawyers.
Part of the mosaic of Florida.
We are dreamers. We at least 200,000 in Florida, perhaps 90,000 or more voting in Florida. So this is a slap in the face to our community. And this does nothing to improve the Florida economy or its or its key industries. And it's just surprising to me that the governor, instead of working with our leaders to fix, or to contribute to fixing this problem so that there is a path, forward, he is just using it as a political stunt. And for what? So that he can have a build a wall moment, like
Maria Corina, demonstrating what a partisan issue this has become, and we appreciate your time today. We will absolutely be following this as it develops. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Up next, a state race that chances are you are not even watching, but you should be, because it's a close one. Today and 7 more Sundays until the midterm elections, and we're trying to bring you as many races and candidates as we can. Today, a state house race that a recent poll shows is this close, 1 point apart, which is essentially tied. District 113, redistricted, now comprises some of Miami-Dade's denser neighborhoods in the Gables, Grove, Brickell, Little Havana, Key Biscayne. But in the bigger picture, it counts toward the balance of power as state lawmakers push through their and your agenda. Which brings us to the candidates. Vicki Lopez, Republican, public affairs consultant, active in and well-versed in state politics, and A.J. D'Amico, Democrat, lawyer, and first-time candidate, though he has worked in politics with a former state senator and a former South Florida congresswoman. Welcome to you both for this, not so much a debate, but a lively conversation. Good to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Glenna.
So, and I want you to feel free to speak to each other if you like as well, because, we're all family here. So Let's start out with, there's a lot of state issues, a little bit of time, taste of the race today, but I want to start out with sort of a specific 113 issue. So Vicki, why don't you start off, and we'll just kind of go in reading order. And what do you see as the districts in Miami-Dade and South Florida's biggest issues?
So I think after having knocked on at least 3,000 doors from June forward, the most pressing issue that I'm hearing in the district is, of course, the affordable housing crisis that we're in. And I think it is more predominant in several of the pockets in the district, like Little Havana, where the elderly are finding themselves completely out of they're on fixed incomes, obviously. And so for them, as rents go up and as housing becomes much more unaffordable, they're having to make very difficult choices as to whether they're going to eat 3 meals a day, or 2 meals a day, or 1 meal a day, or whether they're going to be able to take their medicine every day. So
what's the headline on the steps to start fixing that? Because there have been some steps taken. Yeah.
There have been, and I think clearly the local government has been doing what it needs to do. But I do think that at the state level, as you can recall, Glenna, in 1992, when they first created the Sadowski Housing Trust Fund, I think that we have to go back to fully funding that for affordable housing.
And stop rating it.
Well, they did make a promise last year not to rate it, but they actually did take funds out for resilience projects. And I think that we need to find money for both of the very important issues, affordable housing and the resilience projects. And I think currently now the housing project obviously is a crisis, and we have to address it.
A.J. D'Amico, what is your headline for biggest issues in 113?
So thank you for having me, Glenna. I don't disagree with Vicki that housing affordability is a critical issue facing our state and our city, especially with young professionals like me who are born and raised in Miami-Dade and want to keep their roots in Miami, but can't because we're priced out. But I do think, after also knocking on many doors, that women's rights and reaffirming and recognizing a woman's right to choose has been top of everyone's mind since the Dobbs decision in June. We need to address women's reproductive rights as a human dignity matter, as well as one of public health, because as you know right now, there are no exceptions for rape, incest, or the health of the mother in the state's 15-week abortion ban, which I would vehemently oppose.
So let's talk about that a little bit, and obviously, A.J., you would fight that, but Vicki, your GOP colleagues right now in the state legislature, they passed 15 weeks. Now that there are no federal protections on abortion, the governor and some of the people in the state house have telegraphed that they would like to go further. Where do you stand on that?
So I do think that they've been somewhat telegraphing that, but I don't think that there's been any decision on it. The way I stand is very clear. I mean, I support the 15 weeks, but I would have supported even more exceptions. I would have added human trafficking to that. So I think that the victims of rape, incest, human trafficking, and clearly the health, of a mother are the 4 exceptions that I think are critically important. And I've spent a lifetime, as you know, Glenna, working on issues that impact women and girls. And I think that the 15 weeks was not outrageous, especially if you've been following someone's pregnancy, as I have. My best friend's daughter-in-law is now pregnant, and every week I get an update about where the baby is, what it's doing. And I think that 15 weeks was a reasonable a move on the part of the legislature. I think what was unreasonable was not incurring any exceptions.
AJ, do you think 15 weeks is reasonable if that's where it stays?
Absolutely not. I think 15 weeks is not informed by medical data and science, and actually ignores a lot of health complications that women may have while they're pregnant. At the end of the day, it's not just a matter of privacy, but like I said, it's a matter of human dignity. I cannot imagine a more personal and life-changing decision for a person to have to make than to bring a child into the world. While I, as a man, will never experience that, I can empathize with my sister, my mom, my female friends and family for having to make that choice. And I think that choice has to be in a woman's hands, because ultimately it's her body, and the government should not be intruding on that, especially before the point of viability.
You have a lot of Republican women in the House that would disagree with you there. Let's move on quickly to, hopefully you have heard the past couple of segments about the migrants, Venezuelan migrants being relocated to Martha's Vineyard. Vicki, yay or nay on that plan? Would you support that or change it somehow?
Actually, I would change it. So I think we all recognize that the governor has placed, this is an issue because it's impacting Florida more than it's impacting any other state other than Texas and Arizona. And so I always like to look at what's happening in District 113 as it relates to this. And if you know anything about the Little Havana, East Little Havana, West Little Havana, Riverside areas, there are an extraordinary amount of immigrants, both documented and undocumented, that are in need of desperate services now. And that's going to put an incredible burden on the state. And so what I don't understand is why the federal government hasn't been able to come down and visit. I encourage any federal immigration agent to come down to District 113, and I'll walk him and show him the conditions these people are living in and their needs, and why, if they're going to continue to open that border and keep it open, that they're going to need to be providing for us all the resources that we need to be able to treat them. And so again, this is the divisive politics that I'm seeing, and I cannot understand why we can't all sit down together. And I know that in a previous segment, you were talking with someone and you said, there's been bipartisan approaches to try to solve this, and they haven't been able to solve it. But while they're trying to solve it, I think someone needs to come to District 113 and see the impacts of not only on the community, on the resources, but on the very people that are coming and
AJ?
How they're.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that. I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to make sure we fit it all in. AJ, what do you think about the relocation plan?
Glenna, the governor's stunt is taking advantage of vulnerable, oppressed people seeking legal asylum in the United States. They're taking advantage of people who are fleeing social suppression, just like millions of people in South Florida have. And in those people, in those videos that I saw in Martha's Vineyard, I saw the story of my family who fled from Cuba in the early 70s. And I'm left to wonder whether I would be here if the governor at the time decided he didn't want us, and that we would be a strain, that we're illegally trying to come to the United States and to Miami. And I think it turns our back on the values that built this city and built our country. And I think that Florida and America are better than what transpired last week. And I'm excited to get elected to show Florida and to show our community that we are better, that we can have empathy and compassion towards people fleeing the socialist oppression that Republicans always decry. And good Americans like me always decry as well. So,
AJ, Vicki, we are going to take a quick break and back with a little bit of a lightning round in a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
Great, thank you.
We are back with the candidates for District 113, Democrat A.J. D'Amico, Republican Vicki Lopez. In the 4 minutes that we have, there's so many issues from climate change and resiliency and affordable housing. And I want to really, though, zero in on something that was so contentious at the state level, and that is a few laws that a very sizable in your district LGBTQ community feels like an assault on their rights. And A.J., this time let's start with you. Do you agree, and what, as a Democrat right now in Florida, could you possibly do to change the kinds of laws that are being passed in Tallahassee?
Thank you for that question, Glenna. And yes, I believe laws that are intended to divide us against each other are having its intended effect. For example, the Don't Say Gay law, which was the premise of the school board denying LGBTQ commemoration month. I believe it's having the intended effect of chilling free speech of our teachers and our school system, and also it's unconstitutionally vague. And I believe the bill is really smoke and mirrors to wage a culture war and to distract from the fact that Florida is 48th out of 50th in teacher pay. They're 44th out of 50 in pupil student funding. And the governor's administration and Tallahassee Republicans are completely failing House District 113 and the state of Florida in funding our education system with a 9,000 teacher shortage. And laws like this directly contribute to that, because who would want to be a teacher if you're going to be villainized by Tallahassee and state boards of education for doing your job and trying to do a labor of love in your community? So as it relates to your question, whether I can do anything in Tallahassee, I would talk to people as human beings, and I would try to have them empathize and understand the experiences of what it's like to be a public school teacher, what it's like to be a gay child in a high school classroom, or a gay person that is the victim of these legislative attacks and weaponization of our politics.
So a lot of that actually was done in Tallahassee. The law you're talking about is called Parents' Rights in Education. And Vicki, those who passed it on the argument that they wanted to get back to reading, writing, and arithmetic and not social issues in school. And yet we have seen a chilling effect that it has had already. What's your take?
So it's unfortunate, because I agree that we need to get back to the basics. When I was in school, I didn't know anything about the students' personal lives. I didn't know anything about my teacher's personal life. You know, the bell rang, you sat down, they did the curriculum, the bell rang, you got up. And I think what's happening here is that there was this notion to pull back on the gender identity. I would have taken Senator Jeff Brandis's amendment on the floor, which was no sex. I don't know what it is that we're doing, talking about all of these issues, when in fact, as AJ correctly pointed out, we've got reading deficiencies in the 3rd grade. And I don't agree with him that this is the reason why we have a teacher shortage. We know why we have a teacher shortage. Veteran teachers are leaving because in 2005, we got rid of the STEPS program. And when a veteran teacher who's had 12 years in experience is now making the same as a first-time teacher, there's no doubt that veteran teachers who we need to keep are going to be leaving because they can make more money elsewhere. So we need to focus on teacher pay for veterans. We need to focus on curriculums that go back to the basics. And I don't know, I think that all of this is about, teaching tolerance. And I think that that's the job of a parent. I certainly raised my son to be tolerant and be kind and generous and thoughtful with everyone. And we didn't break people up into silos about who they were, how they were. It was, people are people, and you should love them and care for them.
Our lightning round has come to a television hard ending. I just wanted to recognize that in a very divided political state right now, you two are the moderates of your party. So it'll be interested to see how these play out. So great to have you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Glenna. Thank you, AJ. Bye-bye.
And we will be right back. To rewatch today's interviews or listen to the This Week in South Florida podcast, just scan this QR code with your phone and it takes you right to the This Week in South Florida section of local10.com. We thank you so much for being with us. As always, remember we're online 24/7. We'll have a beautiful Sunday.